So, should you buy a Retroid Pocket 3 Plus or an Anbernic RG505? Let's discuss. So, the Pocket 3 Plus and the RG505 are two very similar devices. They have a lot in common, but there's some major glaring differences between the two that we need to address. So let's start off with the similarities first. So in terms of chipset, both the CPU and the GPU, the Pocket 3 Plus and the RG505 are exactly the same. They are completely identical. They both have a Unisoc T618. They both come with 4 gigs of RAM, and they both come with 128 gigs of onboard storage. And in terms of price, they're both roughly the same. During the introductory period, Anbernic are offering a $10 off coupon, and I think Retroid also have a couple of coupons on their site as well, which brings the cost for both devices roughly down to $149 a piece. They are also very similar sizes as well, so I believe the RG505 is slightly taller and slightly wider, and it's technically slightly thinner than the Pocket 3 Plus, but that's only because of the Pocket 3 Plus is stacked shoulder buttons. If you compare the thickness of the devices, not including the stacked shoulder buttons, I believe the Pocket 3 Plus is actually a bit thinner. And one final thing is they both come with Wi-Fi 5 as well as Bluetooth 5.0. So now let's come on to the major differences, one of which I just mentioned. The Pocket 3 Plus has stacked shoulder buttons, so R1 and R2 are essentially front to back. They're R2 and L2 are behind R1 and L1, just the same as with a pair of Joy-Cons or any other modern controller out there. The RG505, on the other hand, just like all of the rest of Anbernic's devices, comes with inline shoulder buttons. So R1, R2, L1 and L2 are all in line with each other, which makes playing modern games difficult, especially if you need quick and direct access to the trigger buttons, such as with like a shooter or something, right? So that's one major difference. Another major difference is the Pocket 3 Plus comes with Android 11 installed by default, whereas the RG505 comes with Android 12 installed by default. And this seems like a win for the Anbernic device, but the one major caveat is the RG505 doesn't come with Google Play services pre-installed, so you don't have access to the Play Store, which really hinders what you can do with this device.
So I just realized that a few days ago Anbernic uploaded a video on YouTube that mentioned that they will actually ship all RG505 units with the Play Store installed by default. So just disregard everything I say about the Play Store not being available. It seems like all retail units will indeed ship with the Play Store. My conclusion is still the same, but yeah, everything I say about the Play Store, just ignore it completely.
Whereas the Pocket 3 Plus, even though it comes with an older version of Android 11 compared to 12 on the RG505, it comes with Google Play services pre-installed, and you know that opens up the door to essentially the entirety of Android gaming. You have access to the Play Store. You can download any Android games you want. You can download any streaming services you want. You can download any emulators you want. It really does open the door massively for what you can do with the device. Another major difference is the screens on both devices. So the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus comes with a 4.7 inch display, whereas the RG505 comes with a 4.95 inch display, and the display on the RG505 is actually the same display as the PS Vita. The PS Vita has exactly twice the resolution of the PSP. So what that means is you have an exact 2 times integer scale that you can use with the screen on the RG505 for PSP games. So according to Russ from Retro Game Core, the screen on the Pocket 3 Plus comes from an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 7. So the RG505 comes with a 4.95 inch display at a screen resolution of 960 by 544. So what that really means is it's roughly a 544p display, which isn't particularly high res, especially when you compare it to screens nowadays. On the other hand, it is an OLED display, and obviously being an OLED, you get the deep blacks, the high contrast, and all of that. On the other hand, the display on the Pocket 3 Plus is a 4.7 inch display with a screen resolution of 1334 by 750. And what that means is obviously it's a higher res display than the RG505, but it's not an OLED screen. It's potentially an IPS screen. We don't really know the technology used, but I would assume it's an IPS display. So what that means is you're not going to get the deep blacks, the high contrast, but you're going to get a much sharper image, and the pixel density on the Pocket 3 Plus is significantly higher than the RG505. So you're going to get a much sharper image, a much clearer image, a much more detailed image, just without the deep blacks and the contrast of an OLED display. Battery is also another major difference. The battery on the Pocket 3 Plus is rated at 4500 milliamp hours, whereas on the RG505 it's rated at 5000. So you get a roughly 10% bigger battery on the RG505, which, considering it has a lower res display and it's also an OLED, which is, potentially battery saving. So you could potentially expect more battery life on the RG505 as opposed to the Pocket 3 Plus, especially considering they both use the same CPU and GPU and everything else. The display on the Pocket 3 Plus also seems to get much brighter and much dimmer than the display on the RG505. So if that's a concern for you, such as, for example, playing at night in bed, where you want the brightness to be as low as possible, the Pocket 3 Plus is going to be a much better choice for you. In terms of peak brightness, the Pocket 3 Plus can supposedly go up to 450 nits, whereas the RG505 can, again, supposedly only go up to 150 nits. So that's a 3x difference between the two, which is, significant, which is very significant indeed. Now, coming on to the ports and all the inputs, they're fairly similar. The Pocket 3 Plus has one major advantage, which is it has a HDMI output. I believe it's a mini HDMI port that you can use to plug into a TV or a monitor or anything and play on a larger screen, whereas the RG505 has nothing of the sort. On the other hand, the RG505 does have start and select buttons on the front of the device, whereas the Pocket 3 Plus has the start and select up top. And if you use RetroArch or anything similar, RetroArch tends to use start and select as hotkeys by default, so that's going to be a bit of a pain on the Pocket 3 Plus. You could remap start and select to something like L3 or R3, which may work for you, but it's something to consider at least. Also, the analog sticks on the RG505 apparently use Hall sensors, and that means they theoretically won't be subject to drift over time. We'll have to see how true that claim is. They supposedly do help significantly with drift, but whether or not they stand the test of time is a whole different matter. And then finally, in terms of weight, the Pocket 3 Plus comes in at 235 grams, whereas the RG505 comes in at 286 grams. So that's a pretty chunky 50 grams difference between the two. And it seems like most of that comes from the thicker casing on the RG505, which to me would indicate a slightly worse feeling device because it's heavier, it's chunkier, it has inline shoulder buttons. It's just not going to feel particularly comfortable to hold. That's something you might have to try out yourself. So personally, I was going to buy an RG505 to compare to the Pocket 3 Plus, but to be honest with you, after hearing more about the RG505, I've just been turned off from it completely. That's not to say it's not a good device, it probably is, and this is something that you will personally have to make your mind up on. So personally, once all is said and done, I would recommend going for the Pocket 3 Plus over the RG505. I think with the pedigree that Anbernic has, especially with the RG351 series of devices, they have built up a good amount of goodwill with people. But I think the Pocket 3 Plus is just better in most regards, and it also comes with the same CPU, the same GPU, the same amount of RAM, the same amount of onboard storage, a higher res display with better PPI. It's lighter, it's thinner, it has HDMI out, and again, it's the same price, and it's the same SoC, so it's going to play games exactly the same. And to me, frankly, Anbernic have been slipping very badly ever since they stopped production of their RG351 devices. I think that was really their peak. The 505 is a step in the right direction, but as of right now, it can't really compete with the Pocket 3 Plus. To me, it's a no-brainer. There's no reason to buy the RG505 unless you're dead set on the OLED display and getting perfect integer scaling with PSP games. Other than that, unfortunately, there's no real reason to buy an RG505 over a Pocket 3 Plus. So let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below on which device you're going to get, your thoughts, your opinions. If you want to see another video on the Pocket 3 Plus, there's one up here. And stay tuned for when I eventually do get my Pocket 3 Plus in the post. I'll be doing an unboxing, first impressions, and hopefully a couple more videos after that as well. And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.